LOL take two. LOL take two. LOL take two. Now listen. They say the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I can say with certainty that no creative person starts a project, a film, a song, a novel, even a podcast with anything but good intentions that this is the greatest idea ever. Yay, I'm so excited about this. Let's get going. The creation of one of these little podcasts is a whole journey unto itself. Its own little road to hell started with the best intentions, but also fraught with minefields of self-doubt, stumbling, and eventually asking yourself, why in the hell have I put myself through this every month for the past 3 years? Oh my God, am I crazy? I have found that all creative projects share this similar journey. The bigger the project, the more people you have to blame when things go south. But when it's just you creating a dozen minutes of comedy, you're the only one who can take the credit for the good, the bad, and the lousy. In the book, Steal Like an Artist, Austin Kleon, who encourages you to quote him, by the way, documents the stages in the life of a creative project. They all start with, this is the best idea ever, and then move on to, okay, this is harder than I thought, and on to, this is going to take some work, which in turn leads to, this sucks and it's boring. You finally reach rock bottom, which he rightfully calls dark night of the soul, or it will be good to finish because I'll learn something for next time. But in the end, you manage to pick yourself up and say, it's done. It sucks, but it's not as bad as I thought. I've been asked over the last few years of creating podcasts what my process is, and I got the great idea. Why don't I do a podcast about creating a podcast? And not just the physical steps of creating it, but what's really going on in my head during the process. What a great idea, I thought. So I got this great idea about getting a great idea, which was about a great idea, which was a great idea. Oh my God, this was getting creepy already. I've found that around 2,500 words is the right amount for my podcasts. As I always do, I set up a podcast script with its working title. This one, Good Intentions, and I decide to start off with the familiar parable about good intentions. I stare at my blank page and look at the word count. 11 words. I just started this, and I've already moved into the second stage of creating. This is harder than I thought, or as I like to call it, I should just dump this project and start another one. Wait, no, not so fast, Tony. When we were in junior high and high school, my best friend Toni and I had a theater company in my garage. We sold season tickets, we made brochures, and every once in a while we'd actually get a play up on his feet and perform it for the neighbors. One of our early successes was the 3-person Neil Simon comedy, The Star-Spangled Girl, which starred Toni, me, and one of our favorite actresses, an outspoken 5th grader. It ran 2 performances, both of which were touched by tragedy. On opening night, my sister's gerbil, Charlie, died. After we buried him in a cigar box in the backyard, the cast of the show stood in a circle and dedicated our performance to Charlie. Unfortunately, closing night was even more tragic when our blind dog Tracy dug up the cigar box and Charlie's little bloated corpse. It was like an opening scene on SVU, and we were all horrified, tears streaming down our faces. This time my mother wisely insisted on interring poor Charlie in a hefty bag in the sealed garbage can, and our show went on. After that show, we had a couple of other shows we intended to produce, but unfortunately they never got off the ground, and the favorite actress of ours called me out on it. Tony, you never finish anything you say you're going to. Whoa, what? What? What about that production of The Star-Spangled Girl that you starred in last fall? Sure, we weren't able to get The Impossible Years up on its feet as we had promised in our brochure, but it has a cast of 15, and we're lucky to get 3 to 4 actors to show up for rehearsals. How dare you accuse me of not following through, you little snot-nosed 5th grader with a Toni Tennille haircut? And yes, here I am, 44 years later, and I still hear her voice. And I'm considering abandoning this formerly great idea for a podcast? Oh, hell no, Miss Thing, I'll show you. I reread what I've written so far. At this point, it's 4 pages of free associated nonsense, a complete incoherent mess. I have now officially skipped over the next step of creation. This is going to take some work and jumped right to this sucks and it's boring. Okay, Toni, if I write for 10 minutes, I can go have a cookie. I engage Siri to do my dirty work. I say, hey Siri, set a timer for 10 minutes. Your timer is set. Suddenly, some new ideas come to me, and I can barely type fast enough to get them all down. Thank God I learned how to type all those decades ago. In fact, I think typing was probably the most valuable skill I ever learned while in the Urbandale public school system. Back in the garage theater, I'd been using my mom's old Royal typewriter to create all the programs for our plays. I would peck out the letters one finger at a time. But that all changed in the 7th grade when I took Intro to Typing class with Mr. Staker. He would play a record of this monotone voice talking us through our letter drills while we typed along. A, 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 B, 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 B. It didn't hurt that I played piano, so I quickly took to the fingering on the typewriter. It also didn't hurt that Mr. Staker was just adorable. I mean, handsome movie star good looks with dimples and a 70s mustache, and he'd walk up and down the classroom watching everyone else fumbling to the recording. But I would be sitting there smiling up at him while not looking down at my fingers and imagining what our glamorous home would be like when Mr. Staker and I would eventually become a couple and move to Hollywood together. It is around this point in the creative process where I hit a wall. I now have 5,000 words that make absolutely no sense, and I have officially hit Dark Night of the Soul. It will be good to finish because I'll learn something for next time. My date book shows I had work on podcast on my to-do list every day last week. Monday came, didn't touch it. It's okay, it's just a day. I'm busy at my job, and I had to spray for ants and water the outside pots because it's very hot this week in LA. Wednesday and Thursday went by. Nothing. I think maybe this isn't such a great idea after all. I mean, here I am documenting my procrastination for all the world to see, all the while trying to analyze why I am procrastinating. It's like holding up a mirror to a mirror and you get that endless loop of mirrors. It's Friday today. Start of the weekend. 15 minutes on the podcast is on my list again. I have a little time before I have to log on to work. I can just sit and waste that time on social media or set my timer and start typing. And that is what I just typed. But suddenly, today, I don't feel like the idea is such a bad idea. In fact, sharing my process might be amusing or helpful for other folks. I'm getting my mojo back, and it's at this point that I start thinking of what image will I use for this podcast. Senior year of high school, I knew I would be getting out of Iowa and attending the University of Minnesota the next fall. It was a great, creative, and productive time. My friend Toni and I went to the Civic Center that year and saw the touring production of Neil Simon's play Chapter 2, which starred Dawn Wells. She was famous for playing Mary Ann on Gilligan's Island, a show we watched religiously after school. And Dawn was amazing on stage in the play. She made us laugh. She cried buckets during Jenny's big monologue at the end. We snuck backstage afterward and stalked her just as she was getting on her bus. Miss Wells, Miss Wells! She turned around in her hat and 80s turquoise blue cowl-neck sweater. She was obviously spent after having given that fantastic performance. We just want to tell you how wonderful you were tonight. She thanked us. And we also wanted to tell you that our favorite episode of Gilligan's Island is where you, Ginger, and Mrs. Howell play the girl group the Honeybees, and you sing You Need Us. Yes, we really did say that to her. How embarrassing. I can only imagine what losers she thought we were. But really, Google it. It's a fabulous television moment. Later that year, the summer before college, we talked about doing one last play in the garage before we all went our separate ways. I was already booked doing Fiddler on the Roof at a dinner theater, but I had 1 week off. We hemmed and hawed about the logistics of mounting our last show, and I almost gave up on the idea, but I heard that damn voice again. Toni, you never finish anything you say you're going to. And on my 1 week off, we mounted Chapter 2 in the garage. I played George. Toni played my brother Leo, and our friend Dolly was fabulous as Jenny, the Dawn Wells role, and our friend Terry played Crazy Faye. And no, we did not use that little snot-nosed actress in it. I wasn't being vindictive. It just didn't work out. At this point in the podcast process, I take the first big dive into reading it aloud and recording it. It's excruciating, but it's something I have to do. What I find during these dress rehearsals is that the good stuff pops out at me. I've gone from being the writer to being the actor who's going to voice it, and it's like there's a new person sitting there with a fresh perspective. I do several of these run-throughs, and it quickly starts coming together. I have now become my own version of Sybil, the actor me fighting with the writer me, and the actor me usually wins. In a day or so, it's time to step into my little closet, the quietest place in my house, put on headphones, and plug my Apogee microphone into GarageBand on my iPhone. My iPad acts as my teleprompter and sits on bookshelves holding 600 CDs from the last century. I take a deep breath and push record. I almost always keep the first try, but inevitably I will use the second. Before I record the second, there's always this moment of extreme hesitation. This isn't good enough. I should wait and do some more writing. Creative coach Bonnie Gillespie says to launch at 85%. Don't wait until it's perfect at 100% because it will never be perfect and then you'll never get it out there. Your 85% is probably way better than you think it is. And on top of that, that little wretched fifth grader would have won. So right before my second take, I say aloud, launch at 85%, and I start recording. I then listen to all my takes to make sure there wasn't a helicopter going over the house or our white boxer Roxy was barking at something in the backyard. Sounds good. I transfer the audio files to my desktop and begin editing. Now the third of my Sybil personalities comes into play, the editor me. Now it's all about the rhythm of the podcast, almost like it's a piece of music. I up the bass on it, level off the sound, and insert it into a template I have with the beginning and ending music. Let's face it, people watching or listening to a series like a standard beginning and ending. I mean, can you imagine the Golden Girls without "Thank you for being a friend"? I didn't think so. I give it one more listen with headphones, and if I chuckle, all the better. But I've reached that final part of the creative process. It's done, and it sucks, but not as bad as I thought. I save it as an MP3, upload it to my podcast hosting site, and click publish. I unplug my microphone, put away my headphones, and save my script to send off to the copyright office. I followed through. I finished it. I go have another cookie. So back to that question I inevitably ask myself. Why put myself through this every month for going on 3 years? And what surprised me when I really thought about it was that these podcasts aren't so much about talent, but courage. Courage to just do it. Courage to dare it to suck. Because if it does, who cares? If somebody hates it, big deal. For me, it's good to practice courage getting through this process and to remind myself that I can do this. Taking this journey gets me back to that blissful state of when I was pretending and making up stuff as a kid. It's fun. It's joy. It's a connection to the real me. And the voice of that little fifth grader? God love her. She has kicked my butt into action more times than she will ever know. And sometimes I get really nice feedback from folks about these podcasts who said it moved them or gave them a good laugh, and that is wonderful, and I so appreciate it. But honestly, it's merely the icing on the cake. Creating these things simply for the joy of doing it is the cake. LOL take two. LOL take two. LOL take two.